are indiscriminate. They kill civilians, and 123 countries have agreed to ban them. But the United States says it will send controversial cluster bombs for use in Ukraine. The Pentagon says Ukraine needs them, in short, as they're at risk of running out of ammunition.
It will be critical to provide Ukraine with a bridge of supplies while our domestic production is ramped up. We will not leave Ukraine defenseless at any point in this conflict, period.
President Biden arrives in London in a couple of days and then to a NATO summit. So what would the UK say to him about the use of cluster bombs? Robert is in Washington for us. Also tonight.
What did you want him to know?
The pain that we went through and that we're still going through.
The mum of Olivia Pratt-Corbell describes what it was like when her daughter's killer refused to come to court. She wants a change in the law. Why the Education Secretary is fighting Downing Street on what to give England's striking teachers. The streets where nearly every home is a holiday let and what it's doing to seaside towns. And Murray out of Wimbledon and may not be back. It was definitely not a good day on the tennis courts for Britain's men.
This is ITV News at 10 with Chris Shipp.
Hello, good evening. In a move which could divide its Western allies, the United States has tonight agreed to supply Ukraine with controversial cluster munitions. It's a weapon which more than 120 countries have banned, including the UK, but not the United States or Ukraine or Russia, which has used them in this war already. The bombs work by scattering scores of smaller so-called bomblets over a wide area and can injure and kill civilians. The White House says it was to prevent Ukraine running out of ammunition, but there is unease among some NATO allies, all of whom President Biden will meet in Europe next week. The UK government maintains its opposition to cluster bombs, but can't stop other countries using them.
Cluster munitions have already been used by both sides in the Ukrainian war. Russians often firing them even into urban and civilian environments. It is a form of warfare banned by more than 100 nations. Not least because of the devastating effect of unexploded ordnance long after a conflict has ended. When a cluster munition detonates, hundreds of smaller bombs rain down, some of which do not explode on impact and are often picked up years later by unsuspecting children.
Ukraine is committed to post-conflict demining efforts to mitigate any potential harm to civilians, and this will be necessary regardless of whether the United States provides these munitions or not, because of Russia's widespread use of cluster munitions.
Armata! The Pentagon says it is a necessary response to the Ukrainians running short of ordinary shells. For this conflict has become a relentless artillery battle over a front line stretching for 600 miles. I put it to the Pentagon spokesman that America was helping the Ukrainians with a move that will appall many other countries, including allies.
This particular type of munition is something that will give them an advantage, give them the ability to change the equation on the battlefield, and so we felt that it was important to provide it to them now.
Well, that may be true, General, but it's also true that in years, even decades to come, children in Ukraine are going to die handling American munitions.
Well, a couple points I would make to you, Robert. First of all, we are going to be carefully selecting munitions from our inventory that have a low dud rate. Any of the munitions that we provide will be lower than a 2.3% dud rate. Now, the other point I would make to you is that throughout the course of this conflict, Russia has been using cluster munitions with as high as a 30 to 40% dud rate. So, and oh, by the way, mines. So this is something that Ukraine is going to have to deal with anyway. And you could also make the argument that innocent civilians are dying. So it's important that we help Ukraine now in order to stem the tide, take back their country, and help this bloodshed stop.
President Zelensky, who was today visiting Prague, has long begged for faster delivery of weaponry, including cluster bombs, to help Ukraine with a counter-offensive that is struggling to punch through Russian defensive lines. The question is whether cluster munitions will change the dynamics on the ground in a conflict that has become a brutal battle of attrition. But there is undeniably another issue. Has America just surrendered the moral high ground?
And Robert's at the Pentagon now. Robert, President Biden leaves Washington, heading for the UK, for London on Sunday night, and then NATO next week. I mean, he knows this is going to be very controversial with other leaders, including the UK Prime Minister.
And not only, Chris, does the White House know that, Congress knows that, and even senior officials here at the Pentagon know that. I mean, this NATO summit in Vilnius in Lithuania next week was intended to be all about a show of solidarity and unity with Ukraine. Now, this move on cluster bombs is certainly going to cause deep unease amongst European NATO allies. More than that, potentially it gives Russia an excuse or a pretext for further escalation. I pressed the Pentagon spokesman hard on this, and he kept on coming back to a single factor, which is military expediency. He said that Ukraine is running dramatically short of regular artillery shells and other ammunition, and that without the provision, the supply of America's vast arsenal of cluster bombs, there is absolutely the potential for a long-term stalemate on the battlefield. So in a way, I mean, Washington has made, Chris, just a hard-headed decision about risk. The greater risk, in their view, is not unexploded ordnance in the years and decades ahead, but rather this stalemate right now on the battlefield. And they have insisted, they have requested Ukraine to only use these cluster munitions against military targets and to carefully log where they are being used so that that can assist demining efforts in the years ahead.
OK, Robert, a lot to discuss when Mr Biden meets Rishi Sunak on Monday. Thank you very much. The law may have caught up with the gangster who shot dead 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel in her own home. But in a moving and thought-provoking interview with us, Olivia's mother, Cheryl, told us how the pain never goes away and justice can never be done. Even though he was jailed for 42 years, Thomas Cashman still had one callous act of brutality to inflict on Olivia's family when he refused to come to court for sentencing. Now, Cheryl Korbel says criminals must be forced to appear in the dock when the judge passes sentence. She told Chloe how it still burns inside that she was not able to tell him to his face about the pain they suffered when they lost their precious daughter they called Liv.
Hey guys, it's me, Olivia, and today I'm going to make a cocktail. I've already got a straw, and then I've got a cocktail. And then basically it's a kid's cocktail.
Hearing Olivia's constant chatter is one of the things her mum says she misses the most.
Don't worry.
My little shadow. It was always me and Liv.
For Cheryl Korbel, life without Olivia is unbearably quiet. It's 10 months since her daughter was shot dead when a man with a gun burst into their home. In court, her family had to relive that night again and again.
It's a life sentence for us as a family. So you never get closure. And then for him not to turn up was more of a punch in the stomach.
Thomas Cashman refused to come to court for his sentencing or to hear Cheryl and Olivia's sister Chloe read the statements they'd prepared, detailing the devastation he's caused.
It's not a quick process at all, because we went from before Liv was born, through her life, the night it happened, the night she was killed, and the aftermath. And it is a lot. It was draining.
But when she realised the dock would be empty, she questioned whether she should read it out at all.
What did you want him to know?
The pain that we went through and that we're still going through.
He'd been found guilty, and I think it was a bit of, I don't know, it's like he still had that bit of power, he still had that control.
And that's why Cheryl and Olivia's auntie Antonia are campaigning for a change in the law to force criminals to attend their sentencing and face their victims' families in court.
10 months have just flown by.
It's like we blinked.
As for what happened, it's like yesterday.
What did happen one evening last August changed their lives forever, as Cashman chased a drug dealer down their street and through the Corbell family's open front door. As he shot at his intended target, one of his bullets hit Cheryl in the wrist and killed Olivia.
I don't think I'll ever process that night. It's just something we've got to learn to live with. Because if I hadn't have been hit, could I have saved her?
No, it's wrong.
Last month would have been Olivia's 10th birthday.
Sassy little princess. Wind up merchant. Yeah, she loved dressing up.
Stop.
She was looking forward to reaching a double digits, as any kids would be. But she's still here. She's still here. She may not have a voice, but we're their voice.
They're creating a garden in Olivia's memory in the park where she used to play. This mural was made by the children at her school.
We've got have hope, keep smiling, keep going. And then this side we've got be yourself, stay positive and be happy. I think it being so colourful. Yeah. Because Olivia was a colourful person. So I think it'll bring happy memories for them.
The children have planted flowers, many of them pink, Olivia's favourite colour.
Yeah, they're definitely the sunflowers, them ones.
What do you think she'd think about it? She'd be over the moon. She'd be made up with it.
This, they hope, will be part of Olivia's long-term legacy, together with a change in the law to force killers to face up to their victims' families, to hear their heartbreak and to witness the devastation they've caused. Chloe Keedy, News at 10, Liverpool.
And Chloe has written about the campaign by Olivia's family. It's on our website at itv.com/news. Next, ITV News has learnt tonight that there are, how should we put this, some differing views within the government over how to settle the teachers' strikes in England. Many schools were closed again today and teachers are threatening more action in the autumn unless the proposals from the pay review body, we understand to be at 6.5%, are put on the table. The Education Secretary is said to favour the pay body suggestion, but in Number 10 and the Treasury, they're worried about inflation.
On Wednesday, teachers marched on Parliament during their 7th strike this year. Today, they walked out again. No education cuts. 8 days of disruption for parents and pupils that they say are necessary.
We aren't able to recruit and we aren't able to retain, and we're losing really experienced, committed teachers from the profession, but we're also not recruiting new graduates because the profession has become so undesirable.
When the National Education Union rejected a £1,000 one-off payment and 4.5% pay increase in April, the Education Secretary told them.
We're going through the independent pay review bodies, so we're all giving our evidence. So that's the process we're now undertaking.
ITV News understands that process has resulted in a recommendation that teachers receive a 6.5% pay rise. a figure that unions have suggested they would accept if fully funded. But now the government has hinted it may not go that far because of worries about inflation.
But the real danger if Gillian Keegan doesn't get around the table is that come September, it won't just be the National Education Union out on strike, it will also be the head teacher unions.
In public, the Education Secretary is being very careful with what she says. But I've been told that behind the scenes, Gillian Keegan is pushing for teachers to get that recommended pay rise. The question is whether she can persuade the Treasury and Number 10 Downing Street to go ahead with that. Sources suggest the Prime Minister is not yet convinced and the decision remains on a knife edge. The Department for Education said it wouldn't comment on private conversations as ministers continued to warn about the economic context.
The economic situation is particularly challenging, and so every bit that we spend can have an effect of increasing inflation.
But one economist argued that inflation should not be the deciding factor for the government on this decision.
The Bank of England have been tasked with worrying about inflation. What the government should be worrying about is, are they paying teachers enough? Are they having trouble recruiting and retaining teachers? What's the right amount of money to be paying our teachers?
Ministers are acutely aware of how frustrating empty classrooms are to parents.
There should be a common ground that we should get to, some understanding, so that it doesn't go on to September, October, December.
Which is why sources say they hope to reach a resolution in the next 2 weeks. Anushka Astana, News at 10.
To Scotland now, and next week's planned strikes by junior doctors have been averted. The three-day walkout starting on the 12th of July was suspended today after the Scottish Government offered a new pay deal. The offer is thought to be worth 12.4% this year. The BMA's Junior Doctors Committee says it will be put to members next week. Now, the school whose head teacher, Ruth Perry, took her own life after it was rated inadequate last November is understood to have been upgraded in a new Ofsted inspection. The new revised good rating for Caversham Primary in Berkshire has not yet been published, but Miss Perry's family says it shows that schools should be given the chance to correct weaknesses before ratings are made public. Sejal is here, who can take us through what happened. And I think a lot of people remember the anger that bubbled to the surface across the education sector when news of Ruth Perry's death was announced.
Yes, that's right. And Ofsted re-inspected that school last month and upgraded it to good. Ruth Perry's sister said the result was a vindication for Ruth Perry, the school and the staff, proving that Ruth's leadership was not inadequate and Caversham Primary was never a failing school. Ofsted inspected the school 6 months after the head teacher took her own life, not as a result of her death, but in line with guidelines to monitor schools that need to improve. The head teacher's death prompted, as you said, widespread anger and debate about Ofsted's one-word rating system. Teachers and schools dubbed it unfair. The watchdog defended it, saying it won't be scrapping it because a great many parents found its succinct summary helpful when choosing a school. MPs are holding an inquiry in the autumn looking at how the inspection system is working. They won't be considering the circumstances around Ruth Perry's death. That will be examined by a coroner, but they will be reviewing how helpful the system is to parents, governors and schools in England.
OK, thank you for that update, Schedule. Now, the gunman who murdered a beautician at a pub on Merseyside last Christmas Eve was jailed for 48 years today. Ellie Edwards was killed at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey shortly before midnight, hit twice in the back of the head by bullets from an illegal submachine gun. The gun was fired by Connor Chapman, who had been involved in a feud between gangs. 5 other people were injured as he aimed a hail of bullets at a group of people. The judge called Chapman a highly dangerous man. Now, it didn't take long for the Scottish Government's radical proposals on drug laws to be knocked back today. Less than an hour, in fact. They included decriminalising all drugs for personal use as part of a strategy to cut drug deaths in Scotland, which are the highest in Western Europe. But this is one of those matters that can only be decided at Westminster, not by the nation's devolved governments. And the blunt message from Number 10 today was this: there are no plans to alter our tough stance on drugs.
I was around heroin, Valium, stuff like that growing up, methadone, and I thought that was normal.
Stephen Tate has spent 75 days in abstinence-based recovery. He grew up around addiction and became drug dependent himself. Being sent to prison only worsened his issue.
I learnt new drugs, new behaviours, different ways of doing stuff, do you know what I mean? I learnt worse in the jail than what I did out in the street. So I don't really think punishment works. I think there needs to be a wee bit of leeway. I think there need to be a bit more understanding towards what the person's going through.
And that's something the Scottish Government would agree with.
The war on drugs has failed. That's a fact.
Flanked by members of a global commission, Drugs Minister Elena Whittam announced proposals to decriminalise all drugs for personal use in Scotland.
Evidence shows us that decriminalisation reduces harms and supports more people into life-saving treatment.
1,330 deaths in Scotland were due to drugs in 2021. That's an increase of 42% over the last 5 years. It means Scotland has the highest rate of drug deaths in the UK. But the powers to decriminalise lie with Westminster, who quickly responded today saying there are no plans to change their tough stance on drugs.
Scotland has the worst drug death rates in the UK, so surely it's not their issue, it's yours.
I think they have to recognise that that issue is actually nipping at their heels as well. If we're part of a United Kingdom, these people that are dying in Scotland are their citizens as well, and they need to give us the tools, all of the powers, if they're not going to work constructively with me.
Back at Jericho House, they've benefited from recent government funding of rehab beds. The manager, Michael, believes more can be done with the powers at Holyrood.
Scotland is still lacking a lot in the infrastructure required, and if you decriminalise, then where are the resources to rehabilitate?
The Scottish Government say they'll debate decriminalisation in Holyrood after the summer recess. But to save lives, money and time will need to focus around the devolved powers they currently hold. Louise Scott, News at 10.
The family of an 8-year-old girl who was killed when a car crashed into an end-of-term tea party at her school paid tribute to her tonight. She's been named as Selina Lau, who died when a Land Rover crashed through a fence at the Study Prep School in Wimbledon. In a statement, her family said she was adored and loved by everyone. Another 8-year-old girl remains in a life-threatening condition. The government is tonight said to be considering the possibility of new regulations for short-term lets, such as Airbnb, with these types of lets apparently skyrocketing by more than 75% in some popular holiday spots, figures that Airbnb disputes. Councils and community groups have been calling for greater controls. It's claimed local people are being forced out of the property market as a result.
Whitstable, Margate and Broadstairs. Seaside towns on Kent's northeast coast, attracting visitors not just from across the UK, but around the world.
Why did you choose Whitstable?
Sea, oysters, and we're going to get a boat trip now.
Seems like a quintessential British little fishing town.
And where are you staying while you're here?
An Airbnb in Canterbury at the moment.
And why did you choose Airbnb?
It was very convenient.
Yeah, and also the price, of course.
Airbnb is not the only choice for short-term lets, but by far the most popular. As tourism has rebounded since the pandemic, Airbnb listings have exploded in UK holiday hotspots. In May 2019, there were 5,452 Airbnb listings across Kent. By May this year, that had shot up to 7,707 listings, a 41% increase. And it's not just in Kent. In tourist hotspots like Anglesey, the northeast coast and Dorset, Airbnb listings are on the rise. Most Airbnbs and holiday rentals are easily identifiable by lockboxes at the front door. On this street near the seafront, we counted them outside almost 1 in 3 homes. Well, there's a lockbox at this house here. There's another one at that house across the road. There's another one at this house, and it's like this all the way up and down this street. And just spending a bit of time here, you very quickly get the impression that there's not many people that live in these houses all year round. Diane has lived on this street since 1986.
All of a sudden, you know, just holiday homes everywhere. No, it's horrible. As they were hoping next door, you know, and they move, it's not another holiday home. I thought they'll have to move all round.
Diane's only full-time neighbours are fed up and now selling up.
If I had them, I would have an Airbnb as well, but it would have to be regulated.
Nestled among Whitstable's holiday lets, the Fountain pub is benefiting from the extra tourists, but the pub's landlord says it's a double-edged sword.
When me and my missus were looking about a year ago, there was almost 2,000 Airbnbs available and there were 18 properties available for full-term rent. The majority of those were on the seafront for over £2,500 a month. So, you know, pretty unaffordable for someone who lives locally, works locally.
Airbnb says a typical UK host rents space in their home for just 3 nights a month. A spokesperson told ITV News Airbnb has led the way in calling for new rules to clamp down on speculators driving local concerns. In Whitstable and other tourist hotspots across the UK, many local residents believe those new rules can't come soon enough. Harry Horton, News at 10.
Now, the third Ashes test between England and Australia is finally poised tonight after an action-packed second day at Headingley. A typically belligerent knock of 80 by captain Ben Stokes rescued England from potential calamity, but they were still 26 crucial runs behind on the first innings. In Australia's second innings, some good bowling kept England in the hunt, but the tourists still have a healthy lead of 142 with 6 wickets in hand. And finally, so to the tennis. And today at Wimbledon had all the makings of a British tennis epic, didn't it? Andy Murray bringing back memories of the glory days in a titanic battle against the 5th seed. Cameron Norrie, who reached the semis last year in action. And Liam Brodie trying to capitalise on a good win in the previous round. Sad to say, things didn't quite work out like that. Tonight there are no British men left in the singles.
Some were calling it Fantastic Friday. The excitement at Wimbledon building from first thing, determined to fly the flag as Andy Murray prepared to resume his match against Stefanos Tsitsipas.
My favourite player is Andy Murray to Nadal, but I like Andy Murray more because I'm Scottish.
It's 10 years to the day since he lifted his first Wimbledon Championship trophy. 2 sets to 1 up after his overnight lead. Could Murray finish off his opponent? The 4th set went with serve, with echoes of Murray mastery on show. Even the Strawberries were celebrating. Into a tie-break, but Tsitsipas had the edge, taking it to a 5th set.
And there it is from Tsitsipas.
And it didn't take long for him to break Murray and power ahead.
Oh, he has it.
The Fantastic Friday wasn't working out as planned, as Murray's tournament seemed to slip away. In the end, it wasn't Murray's day, despite his determination. So could this be the last time we see him playing here?
Obviously very disappointed just now. Yeah, obviously you never know how many opportunities you're going to get to play here. So, yeah, the defeats maybe, yeah, feel a bit tougher. But to be honest, every year that Wimbledon's not gone how I'd like, it's been hard.
On court number 1, Britain's men's number 1, Cameron Norrie saw his Wimbledon come to an end.
He's the biggest of winners here.
After being beaten by America's Chris Eubanks 3 sets to 1. Britain's last glimmer of hope, wild card Liam Brodie, was also sent packing his bags this evening after losing to Canada's Denis Shapovalov. So the sun has set on British men's hopes for another year. But tomorrow's another day, and Katie Boulter's back in action against last year's champion, Elena Rybakina. Neil Connery, News at 10, Wimbledon.
And good luck to Katie tomorrow. And for the men, there is always next year. That's it from the team here. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.